Then we have musicals with child protagonists, but not necessarily aimed for children. So here we have all those controversial themes that we discussed last week. Especially two titles here, The Falsettos and Fun Home, about children either facing the problem of their own, discovering their own sexual orientation in Fun Home, or living in the adult world where the adults in their life, the parents, are not exactly typical, like in the falsettos. Here, perhaps Billy Elliot would also fall into this category. We have a child protagonist, a boy who lives in impoverished neighborhood in 1980s Britain, in a coal mining town. So this is really the backdrop of miners' strikes and the political struggles during Margaret Thatcher's term as the Prime Minister. And on top of that, we have a private story about this title protagonist, a boy called Billy Elliot, who doesn't want to play football, but he wants to dance ballet. So it's not exactly connected with sexual orientation, but we have a child who does not want to do what children in the neighborhood are supposed to be doing, and of course the family, the community, and everybody have to accept this boy's talents for what they are. So quite a lot of such musicals. Another similar, but I would say reversed in the terms of gender. Another such musical would be Bend It Like Beckham, based also on the 80s story from impoverished sections of British society. And here we have a teenage girl who wants to play football, who doesn't want to do girly things. She wants to play football. So probably trailing on the popularity of Billy Elliot. And then we have another subcategory, a huge subcategory that we are not really going to talk about today, but I strongly encourage you, if you're interested, to explore it, because it's huge, and namely musicals not so much about children, but about high school kids, about teenagers. And if you know anything, especially in American culture, high school is tremendously important social institution, and you have lots of films and lots of stories and of course lots of musicals dealing with the problems of high school kids. And if we look at classical titles, if we look at classical musicals, then we have first of all two big names, two big titles, Fame and Grease, both about high school kids. Fame is about the pupils of an artistic school in New York. So this is also a question of discovering your talents, developing your talents. So these are not your average school kids. These are very talented young people who will very likely grow to be artists in later life, and now they are in the process of training to be artists. Of course, there are As usual, problems with fitting in, problems with friendship, with the first romantic interest and sexual encounters, and especially in case of fame. We also have one of the relatively early presentations of non-heterosexual characters. Then we have Grease, a very successful musical set in the 1960s. So we have the whole disco culture. We have a lot of fashion in clothes and in music from this period, and the whole story is about the romantic interest between a good girl and a bad boy. So a very, I would say, stereotypical arrangement. So a school rebellious kid getting interested in the A student. So that's quite interesting for you to explore. There was a sequel called Grease 2. It was a film version, but this time we have a bad girl and a good boy. And despite very good cast, this was a film version. I think this was Michelle Pfeiffer playing the bad girl, and this is quite a famous, or to say notorious, musical because it's said to be one of the worst musical sequels ever. There weren't very many of them, but this one is particularly bad. But it's so bad it's good. If you want to see something funny, it has some funny moments. Then we have a lot, and I mean a lot, of high school musicals, probably again trailing on the popularity of films, sometimes film musicals like High School Musical, or a TV series called Glee about a high school choir. Using a lot of music, using clever reinterpretations, so it's like a kind of jukebox musical, and then a whole wave in the recent years, in very recent years, of musicals set in high schools and based on films, mostly American films, which have become classics by now. They were not originally musicals, but there you go. Things like Clueless, so another jukebox musical set in high school. Mean Girls, Heathers, so classical high school films which were given the musical treatment. The same subjects as always. Fitting in, problems with friends, problem with girlfriends, boyfriends, sometimes problems with sexual orientation. So we have another musical I mentioned last week called Bear, which deals with this problem. Plus, I would say more original titles. The most successful one, the one that I also mentioned a few times during this semester, is Dear Evan Hansen, a very interesting musical about a teenage boy who tries to fit in, and he comes up with an elaborate lie about his supposed friendship with another kid who committed suicide. So it kind of grows and careens out of all proportion. A very interesting musical, and two more titles which feature some LGBT plots. The Prom and everybody's talking about Jamie. I mentioned them last week, so we have a lot of musicals set in high schools dealing with high school problems. This is quite understandable. This is a moment in life when people usually pay a lot of attention to friendship, when they fall in love for the first time, or at least express some interest in people of the other sex or the same sex. So they might discover that their identity is not the most typical one. Another title, very recent, Be More Chill, which uses a little bit of fantasy. This is a kind of techno fantasy, that there is an electronic device that helps kids to be more attractive socially and cool, and basically more desired as friends or romantic objects. So this is a huge subject, perhaps something to explore on your own for your essays maybe. And now I would like to move to the two examples I asked you to prepare beforehand, namely Annie and Matilda.